Is the live 2022 draft. You can see the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be kicking us off. The Browns have the 6th pick. We've got some guys dialed in, so I'm not going to be commentating the whole time because I'll be on the speakerphone with my GM on the other line. But we'll come back and we'll talk about the Browns picks, and obviously you'll sort of see us as we banter back and forth as I'll move around with the screen. So that is it, I think, at this point. So let's go ahead and kick this thing off, and we'll just do the first 3 rounds live. It's about 20 seconds per pick, so you can see where your favorite college guys went or who your team gets if you're not a Browns fan like us, which is allowed on draft day. All right, go Browns, and here we go.
The Lions are now on the clock. The Redskins are now on the clock. The Jets are now on the clock. The Chiefs are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Falcons are now on the clock.
All right, so with this 6th pick, the Browns we chose to take Garrett Wilson. We were going back and forth between Kayvon Thibodeaux and Garrett Wilson, the very, very talented pass rusher from Oregon. But at the end of the day, because of moving on from Juice and OBJ, Garrett Wilson was just too hard to pass up. And you can see he's already going to come in at a 79 with the hidden trade. So that means he's a star, superstar, or maybe even more. And so we're excited about that. I need to resume the draft. We're excited about that pick, and we'll be back up again with 20 to try to continue to fill more needs. So Garrett Wilson staying in Ohio is going to come up 71 and join us from Ohio State University, where he probably had a very incredible career after a very promising freshman season just this last year.
The Texans are now on the
So,
clock.
go Browns.
The Broncos are now on the clock. The Eagles are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. The Steelers are now on the clock. The Raiders are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Rams are now on the clock. The Titans are now on the clock. The Patriots are now on the clock. The Giants are now on the clock. The Buccaneers are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. Bengals are now on the clock.
All right, so as you can see, the Browns just took. We had a long debate there. You could see us waiting. We went ahead and decided to go with Harry Miller. You can see there he's a 77 out of Ohio State. 2 Buckeyes here in the first round for us. Not only because we love the Buckeyes, but they fit positions in need. Again, we did move on from Treader for more draft capital, and so I think Harry Miller is a nice replacement. Again, we're going to try to give Nick Harris some love as well. And there's another Buckeye, Zach Harrison. Again, I'm not sure why some of their colleges come in as NA, so he'll be on the other side of the field when we play the Bengals twice this season. So, anyway, Harry Miller will be the new starting center between Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Davis. So we're very happy with our 2 first-round picks, and of course both hidden traits is a good thing, which usually means star by default. There's the other player we're looking at, by the way, Evan Neal, right guard out of Alabama. You can see his overall was pretty high. We had him as an early round pick. So we'll be back when we have our next pick here. It looks like it's number 5 in the second round. Thanks for sticking around here on our live draft. NagyOnSports. Go Browns.
The Saints are now on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock. The Bills are now on the clock. The Seahawks are now on the clock. The Colts are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Cowboys are now on the clock. The Chargers are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Lions are now on the clock. The Redskins are now on the clock. The Jets are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The 49ers are now on the clock.
All right, so with the fifth pick in the second round, you can see the Browns here. We have taken Trey Sanders. We wanted a running back here for some depth. We have yet to make it through a sim season without some injuries at the running back position. So running back depth was a place for us, even though we did sign a Lair. So now we have Trey Sanders, power back, but high graded. And then the other running back we were looking at, Spiller, went right after him. So those are the two guys we were looking at. Happy to get Trey Sanders out of Alabama. Power back to come in and spell Chubb in those goal line situations, and a spot where we really needed to have a good inside the tackle running back in that playoff game, and it didn't work out for us. So we will be back at pick 30, and we'll talk about it when we get there. Go Browns!
The Broncos are now on the clock. The Eagles are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. The Steelers are now on the clock. The Raiders are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Rams are now on the clock. The Titans are now on the clock. The Patriots are now on the clock. The Giants are now on the clock. The Buccaneers are now on the clock. The Dolphins are now on the clock. The Bengals are now on the clock. The Cardinals are now on the clock. The Saints are now on the clock. The Bengals are now on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock. The Bills are now on the clock. Seahawks are now on the clock. The Colts are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Chargers are now on the clock.
All right, you can see right here the Browns taking Jason Oweh out of Penn State. If you're a recruiting beatnik like I am, you'll know that the Buckeyes really wanted him, and then he picked up, went to Penn State. So he's the 29th rated player. We got him at 62, another hidden trait. So adding depth and pushing, going to come right in as a 75 and going to push Tyreek Smith right away for some of that playing time across from Miles. Again, as we really just want to be able to try to get after the quarterbacks on the other team. That's been the most frustrating part of our sims to this point. So Browns are going to stay in the Big Ten with their second round pick, and we're going to take Jason Oweh, or Oweh, I'll have to figure out how to say it, since I'm hopefully going to be calling a lot of sacks for him here in the coming season. So we've got pick number 24 in the third round coming up. Lots of good, high-graded players left if you saw our board. So we're excited. We'll see you then. Go Browns.
Are now on the clock. The Lions are now on the clock. The Redskins are now on the clock. The Jets are now on the clock. The Chiefs are now on the clock. The 49ers are now on the clock. The Falcons are now on the clock. The Texans are now on the clock. The Broncos are now on the clock. The Eagles are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. The Steelers are now on the clock. The Raiders are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Rams are now on the clock. The Titans are now on the clock. The Patriots are now on the clock. The Giants are now on the clock. The Buccaneers are now on the clock. The Dolphins are now on the clock. The Bengals are now on the clock. The Cardinals are now on the clock. The Saints are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock.
All right, with the draft pick here, you can see we're taking Quinn Carroll from Notre Dame. And he was a projected 7th round pick, but we had an early 2nd round grade on him, and so we took him, and there you can see that was considered a good pick. He is a normal dev trait, but picking up some tackle depth there, so he'll slot in over behind Conklin and try to push Jack a little bit. If Jack starts to struggle, we may consider making a bit of a switch there. So again, we're in a position now where we've gotten all of the positions on our draft board that we wanted, so we're just going to be going best player available and proceeding to that end. So go Browns. We'll see you in a couple picks.
The Seahawks are now on the clock. The Colts are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Chargers are now on the clock.
All right, so here with our 94th pick, we're going to take Adrian Ealy, another tackle for some depth. You can see, most importantly, not only is it a good pick because we had a good grade on him, but He is a scheme fit. He is going to be an agile offensive line with some more tackle depth, which probably renders Chris Hubbard now as some trade fodder or cut bait, at the very least to save some cap. So Adrian Ely, left tackle out of Oklahoma. And you can see we'll have our, we have 7 picks in the top 99 and the 99 overall pick coming up here in just a couple. We'll do that one, and then we'll go ahead and sim through the rest of the 4th, 5th, and 6th to our next pick in the 7th, and then we'll do our 7th and do a quick draft recap at that point. So thanks for hanging with us. Go Browns!
The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Lions are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Jets are now on the clock.
All right, so with pick number 99, you can see we just got some depth here. Linebacker, because we lost guys like Willie Harvey and Tay Davis to free agency. So this guy's mostly going to be playing some special teams. That's why we went for the speed rusher. In theory, he'll be a little bit faster. And you can see we reached and he's a 67, but it is what it is. They can't all be home runs because we hadn't scouted any linebackers because we don't really need any. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead. Actually, I'm going to try to get rid of this.
Are now on the clock.
Try to get rid of this whole to reorder business. There's my draft board here. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and fast forward here to our last pick, which is near the end of the 7th round. Hopefully that's okay for you. Watching at home, so we get to pick number 24 in the 7th round. It is the pick that belongs to us. So only our 3rd and our 7th, actually our picks, everybody else was brought in. So here we go, final pick of the draft. We'll bring it to you in a second. Go Browns.
Bears are now on the clock.
Alright, as you can see there with our last pick, we decided to go ahead and take another Buckeye because why the heck not? So Cam Babb's going to come. He's probably just going to end up on the practice squad for us as we were pretty darn deep at receiver. So we're going to go ahead and head here to the end of the draft. And then we'll do a quick recap video for everybody so you can see who everybody drafted. Thanks for hanging with us. We'll do that in just a second. Alright, so draft recap for all of us. Again, we talked about for the Browns here. We ended up with Garrett Wilson at 79, Harry Miller at a 77, Trey Sanders at a 77, Obey at a 70, Carroll at a 74, Ely at a 71, and then Babb at 67s there. So a lot of Big Ten, a lot of Power 5 guys here for the Browns. But we're going to go ahead and do all the teams if you're just curious. So if you are a Bears fan, your first round pick was Iyaba Anoma from Houston. So not a great draft for them. Most of their guys in the 60s and younger there. Bengals start with Ohio State's Zach Harrison at a 77. It's a good pick for them. And of course we're going to get to see him, Jerrion Ely from Ole Miss as well. And the rest of their picks there for the Bengals. For the Bills, they're going to start out 72 with quarterback Eric Young from Texas A&M, their 2nd round pick. Papo is actually a better rated player. It's Julian Barnett. So a couple of guys from the Big Ten there for them. Broncos ended up with Kayvon Timmons, the other guy we really looked at. He's an 80 overall. He's going to be a really good player for them. We just opted for receiver over DN because of Tyreek Smith last year. And then they took Akeem Dent, so some really good players, and then they dropped off pretty hard after their first 2 picks. Again, you already saw ours. The Buccaneers are going to go Hudson and Henry. I wonder if he's related to Hunter Henry. One of the top tight ends out of Arkansas there. You can see, I wonder if new Gronk has retired again. We'll go through retirees here in a minute as well. Wandale Robinson, talented running back from Nebraska as well on the roster there. Here are the Cardinals. Evan Neal, another guy we were looking at, 79 overall, big. He's a big boy. He's like 6'7", 360. Like, he's a mass of humanity. Purdue there. Chargers, starting with Henry Tuo. Again, they won the AFC runners-up in the Super Bowl. Coburn and then Ladson. They got 3 players in the 70s with their drafts. Good for them. They ended up also with Master Teague here as well. If you're a Buckeye fan watching. Derek Stingley, best player in the draft at an 82. He went at 5. We were really talking about him at 6. We do not really need a cornerback at all, but we knew he was going to be hard to pass up if he was there. So I'm kind of glad that the Chiefs took him right before us. He's going to be really good for them in their backfield. Again, he was maybe the best player on LSU's team as a true freshman this past year when they won the national championship. So we know he's going to be a stud in the pros. So look at that, 2 picks for the Cowboys. They took Spencer Rattler, and the new quarterback will be there from Oklahoma. So the guy who's going to replace Jalen Hurts this year when college football starts will be Spencer Rattler, and he's going to be the new quarterback for the Cowboys again after Dak leaves in free agency. Dolphins start with Dominic Blaylock. get 2 guys in the 70s. Yeah, they get a couple more in the 70s in the back end. Sean Ryan was on our board. So was Jalen Mayfield, actually. So both those guys were on our board. Zamir White. And they also took Teron Vincent from Ohio State there, defensive tackle. Eagles take Marvin Leal, one of the top players in the draft, at a 79. And then the rest of the guys, there's Seven Banks from Ohio State. Tyler Shaver's a pretty good player there. Joey Gatewood, who's quarterback from Auburn. Let's see if he stays at Auburn, because Bo Nix is there too. Antonio Alfano, top pass rusher, goes to the Falcons. And here are the rest of their picks, 3 in the 70s. Only 5 picks for the 49ers. Again, they gave a couple of their guys to us, and you can see they went with Isaiah Spiller, very talented running back, somebody we were looking at. In fact, we took Trace Sanders right in front of him. There's the rest of their players. Again, all big household names in terms of colleges. Cade Stover from Ohio State, ironically, has become a tight end at Ohio State, but the game still thought he was a linebacker, so he's going to go be a new linebacker up with Darnell Wright. So they're 4 picks, and then they also took Josh Proctor, so multiple Buckeyes, and Dallas Gant. Holy moly, multiple Buckeyes going there to the New York Giants. Of course, Darnell Wright was on our board, as you saw as well. Wilker Brown, number 1 overall pick out of 78. There was about 7 of the guys who had higher ratings than him, but if you need it, you need it. And then, of course, Graham Merz from Wisconsin quarterback. So I wonder if he's supposed to be their starter. That would be interesting to see. Jets, they go with Baylor Cup 79, very talented tight end. And then Jaden Daniels out of Arizona State. Kid was really good as a freshman this year for Herm Edwards' football team. The rest of the Jets picks, good draft for the Jets. So look at this, 2nd overall pick, they take Zach Pickens out of South Carolina, and then their 2nd round pick, 3 before we won, we really wanted, and we were hoping he would fall to us. John Emery, also best player, second best player behind Stingley of the draft at an 82, and they got him in the 2nd round. So talented running back for the Detroit Lions. Good on them. To Tyler Friday from Ohio State, and some other players as well. But an 80 in their 2nd round, it's good. It's a good draft there. Andrew Booth to Clemson, and then Theo Weiss. We're going to take Otis Reese. Reese and Weiss. Booth, Reese, and Reese. Coming in there for the Packers. The Panthers. Super Bowl champion Panthers. Teddy Two Gloves, the quarterback, beat the Chargers in the Super Bowl. They go with Clay Webb and then Austin Stoner. So 2 first-round grades on those guys. Getting them all the way into the 2nd round. Good on them. And then some other players there. There's Jalen Gill, of course, who started at Ohio State and ended his career at Boston College. Here are the Patriots. They're going to take middle linebacker Brandon Smith. He's a 77 overall. A couple guys in the 70s. D. Wiggins, Tyus Fields as well as the 2. Boise State quarterback Henry Bachmeier coming in there to play behind Pat Mahomes. Raiders take left guard Devontae Dobbs with their 1st pick, and then Brew McCoy, deep threat speedster from USC. And then they take Tagovailoa, who we did an update to say that he's not from Alabama anymore because he transferred to Maryland. Karlaftis and Bolden, and they got Steele as well. Hey, there's Bo Nix. We just talked about him from Auburn, so we'll see if he makes the Rams roster. Ravens, 4 picks in the 70s again, and they always seem to. Another safety, better the 2nd round pick, better than the 1st. So a cornerback and a safety. Right guard to replace Fluker, who we saw, and then Bray Walker, who is on our board as well, if you remember. Daxton Hill, one of the top-rated players in the game at a 79, goes to the Redskins. They have 3 pretty solid players with their first 3 picks. And then we have Murray Jones, former Buckeye recruit out of Florida. Saints start their draft with Jaden Hasselwood from Oklahoma at a 73, and then Zeke Correll. Phil Jerkovic, the next. Hey, Tyreek Johnson from Ohio State, there he is. Seahawks start off with Savion Jackson. You're not really actually sure where he went to college since he came in as NA. Anthony Cook, player we've been looking at a little bit. Steelers start out with cornerback Tyreek Stevenson. Again, they lost Stevie Nelson in free agency. They're also going to take a pass rusher, wide receiver named Puka. Another cornerback in the 70s. So decent draft for the Steelers. 4 guys in the 70s as well. I didn't take any Buckeyes this year that I love that I have to hate. Nolan Smith, one of the top players in the draft at 80. Again, there's only 4 guys I think rated 80 or higher. And one of them goes, he's a power rusher, fast speed rusher in the 3-4 going to the Texans. That'll be a good pick for them. They also picked up Sam Howell from North Carolina. There. Almost done here. Titans start out with Tresmond Marshall. They get 2 top picks. Noah Cain's going to be a good player for them. Of course, Kareem Hunt is there now. Will be their featured running back. And last but not least, George Pickens, the second receiver in the draft after we took Wilson, goes to them. Their second pick is as high 77 as well. Kyle Hamilton, free safety from Florida State. So there you go. If we look at the whole NFL, we'll find a couple of the other. I can't sort. So there are 4 guys in the 80s. So Stingley and Emery both from LSU, then Georgia, and then Oregon's Kayvon Thibodeau before Daxton Hill, Cup, and Wilson, and Leal, and Neal. So there you go. Those are the draft grades as well. Just because I've got the video going, I will also, just for all of our sakes, go through the retirements this year. Just so you can see the player. Oh, just kidding. I guess I had to do that beforehand. Oh well. We won't know who retired, but I'll figure it out and talk to you about it later. So, that's where we're at right now. We're poised to start the 2022 season here in just a little bit. We'll probably bring in that first game tomorrow or Monday with this new look Browns. Again, this is going to be the last season of our sim as we're starting to get too far into the future and making crazy decisions like trading Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry. So, thanks so much for watching. As always, this is Phil Nagy for NagyOnSports. Go Browns!